Angel Companions, a guide to angelic protection, strength, and victory in the battles of life. Written by Catholic Daily. This book is dedicated to all who seek to win the battles of life through angelic companionship. Introduction. The battle is real, and you are not alone. You did not pick up this book because life is going smoothly. You picked it up because something is hard, and has been hard for long enough that you need more than encouragement. You need to know that you are not alone in it. This introduction is the beginning of that answer. One man knew this truth more deeply than almost anyone who has ever lived, and he knew it not from reading about it, but from experiencing it in the most visceral and terrifying way imaginable. This is Saint Padre Pio. It was the middle of the night in the friary of San Giovanni Rotondo, and the sounds were unmistakable. The other friars had grown accustomed to it by now. The crashes, the heavy thuds, the low and terrible groaning that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. They knew what was happening. Saint Padre Pio was in his cell, and he was not alone. Not in the way any of them wished to be. What happened in that small room in the darkness of southern Italy has been documented by witnesses, attested to in church investigations, and passed down through decades of testimony. Padre Pio was under attack, and night after night, battered and sometimes physically wounded by what he described as the enemy, he endured. He did not run. He did not abandon his cell, or his prayers, or his God. When asked how he survived those nights, his answer was simple, almost casual. He had help. His guardian angel was with him. Not as a vague spiritual comfort, not as a metaphor for inner strength, but as a real presence, a companion in the dark, steady when everything else was in chaos. Padre Pio once wrote to his spiritual director about his angel. He spoke of him the way you might speak of a trusted friend who had sat with you through the worst night of your life. With familiarity, with gratitude, with love. You may not be in a friary in Italy. Your battle may look nothing like Padre Pio's. But if you are holding this book, you are probably in one. Maybe it is quiet and invisible, the kind of battle that takes place inside your own mind at 3 in the morning, when the doubts crowd in and the fear tells you that you are on your own. Maybe it is a battle in your marriage, your family, your health, your work, your faith, or finances. Maybe it is the particular exhaustion of trying to keep going when the ground keeps shifting beneath your feet. Whatever it looks like, this is the truth that this book wants to give you. The battle is real, and you are not alone in it. You have never been alone in it. There is a strange thing that happens to Catholics in times of genuine struggle. We pray. We go to Mass when we can. We reach for the rosary, for the sacraments, for the familiar words that have held us before. And yet so many of us never think to reach for the companions God placed beside us before we were even born. The angels are not a minor footnote in Catholic teaching. They are not decorative beings reserved for children's prayers and Christmas cards. They are part of the fabric of creation, messengers, warriors, guardians, woven into the story of salvation from the very beginning. They were present at the birth of Christ. They ministered to him in the desert after his temptation. An angel strengthened him in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night when the weight of everything was almost unbearable. An angel rolled back the stone on Easter morning. They are present now, too. Yours is present now. The Church has always taught that each person is given a guardian angel at birth, not as a gift to the righteous or the spiritually advanced, but as a gift to every human soul, without exception. Your angel has been with you through every battle you have already survived. Every moment of grace you received, every near miss you never knew about, every time something inside you said not this way and you listened, your companion was there. This book is an invitation to know that companion better, to stop treating angelic help as a nice idea and start receiving it as a living reality. Angel Companions is not an academic study of angelology, though it is grounded in authentic Catholic teaching and the witness of the saints. It is not a devotional in the conventional sense either. It is, as much as anything, a companion in itself, something to sit with in the hard seasons. The book moves in 4 movements. First, we look honestly at the battle, what it is, why life so often feels like a fight, and what it means that God never intended you to face it alone. Then we meet your companions, your guardian angel, the great Archangels Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, and the broader reality of what angels are and why they exist. From there, we look at how angelic help actually works in concrete human experience, in moments of danger, of weakness, of fear, of impossible decisions. And finally, we look at what it means to walk through your daily life in conscious companionship with the angels beside you. Throughout these pages, you will meet the saints, not as distant figures in stained glass, but as men and women who faced real and sometimes terrifying battles, and who found in their angel companions a help that was utterly practical, deeply personal, and entirely real. Their stories are not offered as curiosities. They are offered as evidence. Evidence that what God promises, He delivers. Evidence that the help is there, if we will only receive it. At the end of this book, there is a prayer, one prayer, offered for you to make your own, a conscious and deliberate turning toward the companions who have always been at your side. But you do not need to wait until the end to begin. You are not alone in the battles of life. You have never been alone. Turn the page and let us begin. What you find there may change not just how you think about angels, but how you walk through the rest of your life. Chapter 1. Understanding the battle. You already know something is wrong. Not wrong in a way you can easily name or explain to someone else. Just a persistent weight, a resistance, a sense that the life you are trying to live keeps meeting something that pushes back. You are tired in a way that sleep does not fix. You have prayed and kept going and got back up after the falls, and still the same battles are waiting for you in the morning. If that is where you are, this chapter is for you. Because what you are experiencing has a name, and it is not weakness, and you are not alone in it. No one understood that more completely than a quiet French priest who spent 35 years discovering it in the darkness of his own room. Saint John Vianney had come to the small French village of Ars 11 years earlier, a young priest of unremarkable education assigned to an unremarkable parish. What followed was one of the most extraordinary lives in the history of the Church. Tens of thousands of pilgrims making their way to a village of 200 souls just to sit in his confessional, to be seen by eyes that seemed to look straight through pretense and into the truth of a person. But the pilgrims did not see what happened at night. For more than 35 years, Vianney was subjected to nightly disturbances that defied rational explanation. His bed shook. His curtains were torn. Objects moved. A grinding, scraping sound filled the room, as though something enormous was dragging itself across the floor toward him. On several occasions, the entire rectory seemed to tremble. Once, his mattress was set on fire while he slept. He came to call his nighttime tormentor by a nickname, Le Grappin, the grappling hook. He spoke of it with a kind of grim familiarity, even dry humor, the way a soldier might speak of the enemy whose tactics he has studied for years. The Grappin is very clumsy, he told a friend once. He makes a great racket, but he never does me much harm. What sustained him through those years? What gave a man of fragile health, who slept 3 or 4 hours a night and fasted to the point of physical depletion, the strength to keep going? He spoke often of his guardian angel, of the awareness of that presence as something steady and close, unmoved by the noise and the darkness. When the attacks were at their worst, Vianney prayed. And in the morning, he rose, unlocked the confessional, and waited for the first penitent. He never stopped. He never left. He endured 35 years of nightly assault and came out the other side a saint. Most of us will not face what John Vianney faced. The particular battles assigned to the saints who are called to extraordinary holiness are not the battles assigned to everyone. But there is something in Vianney's story that names what every human being knows, even if they have never had the words for it. Life is a fight. Not always. Not every moment. There are stretches of grace and ease and genuine joy, and those are real and should be received with gratitude. But underneath the ordinary surface of things, underneath the school runs and the work deadlines and the family dinners, there is something else. A resistance, a weight, a sense that the good you are reaching for keeps slipping, and the person you want to be keeps receding just beyond your grasp. You are not imagining it. The battle is real. When we talk about the battles of life, we are talking about two things that are deeply connected, even though they often feel like separate problems. The first is the battle of ordinary human suffering, job loss, marriage strain, children who are lost or struggling, illness that arrives without warning and refuses to leave, grief that does not follow the stages they told you about, but instead shows up without permission in the middle of a supermarket or on an otherwise fine Tuesday afternoon. Financial pressure that grinds at a person month after month until the exhaustion is not just physical, but something deeper, something closer to the soul. These are real battles. They are not small. They are not spiritual problems dressed up as practical ones. They are genuine human suffering, and God does not minimize them. The incarnation itself is God's answer to them. He entered human life fully, not from a safe distance, and he knows the weight of what you carry. But there is a second level of battle, and Catholic teaching has always been honest about it, even in an age that finds it uncomfortable. Behind the suffering and the struggle, there is a spiritual dimension. There is an enemy, and that enemy is not metaphorical. He is not simply a symbol for negative thinking or self-destructive patterns, though he uses those things readily. He is a real adversary who has set himself against every human soul and who works with patience and intelligence toward a specific goal: your separation from God. St. Peter, who knew something about catastrophic personal failure, wrote to the early church with the urgency of someone who had learned this lesson the hard way. Be sober, be watchful. Your adversary prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. It is not the language of metaphor. It is the language of someone who has seen the lion. Understanding that both levels of battle are real is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to free you. Because once you understand what you are actually up against, you can stop blaming yourself for the fact that life is hard and start receiving the help that was always available to you. One of the cruelest aspects of prolonged struggle is the way it convinces you that it is uniquely yours, that other people's lives work in a way that yours does not, that there is something specifically broken about you, your faith, your character, your choices, that explains why you keep finding yourself back in the same hard place. Saint Teresa of Avila understood this. Here was a woman of ferocious intelligence, genuine mystical experience, and reforming energy who nonetheless spent nearly 20 years in what she later described as a spiritual desert, going to prayer out of duty, feeling nothing, wondering if she was entirely deceived about God and herself. She was miserable. She kept going. She did not understand why it was so hard. What Teresa eventually understood, and what she communicated with the authority of someone who had come through the fire, was that the battle she was experiencing was not evidence of abandonment. It was not punishment. It was not proof that she was uniquely defective among the souls who sought God. It was the common experience of every soul that takes the interior life seriously. The battle feels personal because it is personal. Your adversary is not careless or generic. He knows your particular wounds, your particular fears, the precise points at which your courage tends to fail. He has watched you long enough to know where the pressure lands hardest. That is not a reason for despair. It is a reason to take your own defense seriously. And defense, in the Catholic understanding, is never a solo effort. Here is the other side of the truth, the one that changes everything. You were not placed in this battle unprepared, unaccompanied, or without resources. From the very beginning of your existence, God made provision for the fight. He gave you His Son, His sacraments, His church, His word. He gave you, in the mystery of His own life, the Holy Spirit dwelling within you. And He gave you angels, companions assigned to your specific person, your specific life, your specific battle. The existence of the guardian angel is not a pious optional extra for people who like that sort of thing. It is a dogmatic reality of Catholic faith, grounded in Scripture, defined by the Church, and confirmed by centuries of lived testimony from the saints. God did not create you and then leave you to navigate the world alone. He created you and then stationed a powerful, intelligent, faithful being beside you, a being whose entire purpose is bound up with your well-being and your salvation. St. John Vianney knew this. In all those years of nightly assault, he knew he was not alone in his room. He knew something stood between him and the worst that the enemy could do. He spoke of his guardian angel with warmth and familiarity, as one speaks of a companion who has proved himself reliable in the worst of conditions. You have the same companion. You have always had the same companion. The battles you have already survived, the ones that should have broken you, the ones where you do not quite know how you got through, your angel was there. The grace that arrived at the exact moment you needed it, the unexpected clarity, the sense of something holding you steady when everything else was giving way. That was not coincidence. That was companionship. This book is an invitation to stop fighting as though you are alone, not to become superstitious, not to look for angels under every rock or attribute every good mood to supernatural intervention, but to develop the habit of awareness, the simple, daily, growing recognition that you are accompanied, that the battle you are in is real and serious and not yours to fight alone, that the resources available to you are far greater than the ones you have been drawing on. The saints did not have access to something you do not. They had the same faith, the same sacraments, the same church, the same guardian angel standing beside them. What they developed, often through great suffering and long practice, was the ability to receive what was always being offered. That receiving begins with understanding. And understanding begins with a simple, honest acknowledgement. Yes, I am in a battle. Yes, it is real. And no, I was never meant to fight it alone. In the next chapter, we will look more closely at what it means that God made a specific provision against your aloneness, and what it has always cost Him to ensure that you are accompanied. The answer is closer than you think and older than your struggle. Chapter 2. You were never meant to fight alone. There is a question that lives at the back of every prolonged battle, one that rarely gets asked out loud, but drives everything. Why is no one coming? You have prayed. You have waited. You have done what you were supposed to do. And still the wait is there. The morning comes, and the same battle is waiting. If that question has been yours, this chapter is the answer. It begins not with an argument, but with a young woman who had every reason to feel abandoned, and discovered instead that she was more accompanied than she had ever imagined. Saint Gemma Galgani had been through more suffering in her short life than most people encounter in a lifetime. She had lost her mother at 7, her father at 19. She had nursed her father through a long illness, watched the family fall into poverty, and endured a serious illness of her own that had left her partially paralyzed for a time. She had been turned away from the religious order she longed to join, told her health was too poor, her situation too precarious. And yet in the middle of all of this, something extraordinary was happening. Gemma was experiencing visions, mystical graces, and increasingly violent spiritual attacks that left her shaking and physically wounded. The enemy was not subtle with her. He appeared, he threatened, he struck, and Gemma, young and fragile and entirely without worldly protection, faced him. She did not face him alone. Her guardian angel, whom she spoke of in her letters and diary with the easy intimacy of someone describing a dear and constant friend, was present with her through all of it. She wrote about him the way you might write about someone who had sat with you through a long illness, who had brought you water in the night, who had held your hand when the fear was at its worst. He corrected her when she was spiritually careless. He consoled her when she wept. He carried her letters, actual written letters, she reported, to her spiritual director when she had no other way of reaching him. On one occasion, caught in a particularly fierce spiritual assault, Gemma called on her angel and felt the attack subside. My guardian angel, she wrote simply, is always near me. Always. Not sometimes. Not in the moments she remembered to ask. Always. You were never meant to fight alone. That is not wishful thinking. It is the deliberate, considered design of God, written into the structure of creation itself. God does not create needs he has no intention of meeting. He does not build into human beings a longing for companionship and then leave them companionless. He does not create souls capable of suffering and then watch from a distance, unmoved. Everything in the way he has ordered creation, the church, the sacraments, the scriptures, the communion of saints, the very structure of the family, points toward the same reality. You were made for accompaniment. You were made to receive help. That is not weakness. That is the design. The angels are part of that design, not an afterthought, not a secondary system activated when the primary resources fail. They are written into creation from the beginning, part of the original architecture of a world made for relationship between the visible and the invisible, the human and the divine. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote that the ministry of angels extends to individual persons, that each soul has an angelic companion whose care is particular, not general. Your angel is not watching over humanity in the abstract. He is watching over you, specifically, by name, with the full attention of a being incapable of distraction or indifference. This is not a small thing. Let it land for a moment. At this exact moment, as you hear these words, whether you are tired or frightened or numb, or simply going through the motions of a faith that feels thin right now, there is a being of pure intelligence and burning love stationed beside you. Not because you have earned it, not because your prayer life is sufficiently impressive, because God made you and God does not abandon what he makes. One of the most quietly devastating moments in the Gospels is the scene in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus, on the night before his death, takes his closest friends with him to pray. He asks them to stay awake, to stay with him, to keep watch. He goes a little further on, falls to the ground, and begins to pray in an agony that the Gospel writers struggle to describe. He comes back. His friends are asleep. He wakes them, goes back, prays again, returns. They are asleep again. A third time, asleep. The loneliness of that scene is almost unbearable to sit with. The Son of God, in the worst hour of his human experience, alone in the dark while his friends sleep. But the Gospel of Luke adds a detail that the other accounts do not include, and it changes everything. An angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him, not solving the problem, not removing the cup, not making the agony less real, strengthening him, accompanying him. present with him in the dark in a way that his sleeping friends, for all their love, could not manage that night. If God sent an angel to strengthen his own son in the garden, if even Christ, in his human nature, received angelic accompaniment at the point of greatest trial, then what does that tell you about the provision made for you? You are not more self-sufficient than Jesus. You are not expected to need less help. The same Father who sent an angel to the garden has stationed one beside you. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something heavy by yourself for too long. It is different from ordinary tiredness. It has a quality of isolation to it, a hollowness, as though the effort of the battle has cost you not just energy, but something deeper, your sense of being known, being seen, being accompanied in the thing that is consuming you. Many Catholics carry their battles exactly this way. They pray, but privately, guardedly, with a kind of internal shame about the fact that they are still struggling with the same thing they were struggling with a year ago. They go to Mass, but they sit in the pew feeling oddly alone, as though everyone else has access to a grace that somehow does not quite reach them. They love God, but the love feels thin some days, and they do not know what to do with the thinness. Gemma Galgani never made that mistake. Neither did John Vianney. Neither did Padre Pio, who reportedly sent his guardian angel ahead of him as a messenger when he could not reach someone in person, and who spoke of his angel the way a field commander speaks of a trusted lieutenant, with respect, with familiarity, with complete reliance. These were not naive or simple people. They were men and women of rigorous faith and hard-won spiritual experience who had discovered, through the particular suffering of their own lives, that the companionship on offer was real. More real, in some ways, than the human companionship that had failed them. More constant, more patient, more completely present. There is a moment in the story of Elijah that has stayed in the consciousness of the Church for 3,000 years, because it captures something essential about the way God meets human exhaustion. Elijah had just come through one of the most dramatic spiritual victories in the history of Israel, the confrontation on Mount Carmel, the fire from heaven, the slaughter of the prophets of Baal. And then, almost immediately afterward, he collapsed. He ran into the desert, sat down under a juniper tree, and asked God to let him die. He had had enough. He was done. God did not rebuke him. God did not arrive with a theological lecture about the importance of perseverance. An angel touched him and said, simply, "Arise and eat." There was bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. Elijah ate and lay down again. The angel came a second time, touched him, and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. The journey is too great for you." That acknowledgement, that honest, tender recognition of the weight of what a human being carries, is itself a form of grace. The angel did not tell Elijah to be stronger. He fed him. He let him sleep. And then he told him to get up, because there was more road ahead, and he would need the strength. That is what angelic companionship looks like in the real texture of a human life. Not spectacular, necessarily. Not always visible or felt, but present, sustaining, working quietly in the direction of your survival and your flourishing, in ways you will sometimes only recognize in retrospect. You have already received this help, in the moments you got through when you should not have been able to, in the strength that arrived when your own had run out, in the peace that settled over you in the middle of a crisis and did not make sense given the circumstances. You were not alone in those moments. You have never been alone. What changes when you truly receive this truth is subtle but profound. You stop fighting with clenched teeth and a closed fist. You stop carrying the weight of the battle as though it were yours alone to bear. You develop, gradually and with practice, a kind of interior spaciousness that comes from knowing you are accompanied, that the being beside you is stronger than anything you are facing, that your Father has not overlooked your situation, that help is not something you have to earn or manufacture, but something you have only to receive. This is not passivity. Elijah still had to get up. He still had to eat the bread and walk the road. The angels do not fight our battles instead of us. They fight alongside us. There is a difference, and it is the difference between despair and endurance. You are in a battle. It is real. It is hard. And from the very first moment of your existence, God looked at you in that battle and made a decision. You will not face it alone. He has kept that promise every day of your life, whether you knew it or not. Now you know, and knowing changes everything. From this moment, you do not fight alone. Chapter 3. Your Guardian Angel. You have had a guardian angel your entire life. Not as a childhood comfort that adulthood outgrows, but as a specific being, intelligent, faithful, powerful, stationed beside you by God before your first breath. Most of us carry this as a doctrine rather than a lived reality. This chapter is about closing that gap. No one in the history of the Church came to know that companion more vividly than a 15th century woman who could see hers. Saint Frances of Rome was a 15th century noblewoman, a wife, a mother, a woman of deep prayer who ran her household, cared for the poor of Rome, and endured the kind of suffering that strips everything non-essential away, the death of children, the upheaval of war, the loss of everything she had built. Through all of it, she had a companion she could see. For the last 23 years of her life, Frances's guardian angel became visible to her, a radiant childlike figure of extraordinary brightness who walked beside her, whom she described with a specificity and tenderness that still moves readers 6 centuries later. He illuminated her path at night with a light she could read by. He turned away from her when she sinned, not in judgment, but in a kind of sorrow, and his withdrawal was itself a correction more effective than any rebuke. When she returned to God, he returned to her. She spoke of him as one speaks of a beloved and constant companion. She knew his presence the way you know the presence of someone you have lived alongside for decades, by the quality of the air, by something in the atmosphere of the room, by a familiarity that has moved beyond words into something closer to understanding. When Frances died in 1440, her last recorded words were, "The angel has finished his task and is beckoning me to follow him." She had spent her life accompanied. She died accompanied. She followed her companion home. Most of us will not see our guardian angel the way Frances of Rome saw hers. That particular grace is rare, given to very few, and not something to seek or expect as a measure of spiritual progress. Frances herself did not seek it. It was given. But the angel is no less present for being invisible. The warmth of a fire does not depend on your ability to see the flame. The guardian angel assigned to you is as real, as close, and as active as the one who walked beside Frances through the streets of 15th century Rome. The difference is perception, not presence. The guardian angel is not a lesser being, a spiritual minor assigned to human beings, because the more important angels have better things to do. The Church's tradition on this is consistent and striking. The angels assigned to human souls are among the most exalted of created beings, given a task of extraordinary dignity and gravity. Saint Basil the Great wrote in the 4th century that every soul has an angelic companion assigned to it from birth, an overseer and shepherd who guides it toward its salvation. Saint Thomas Aquinas described the guardian angel as a being of pure intellect and will, not limited by a body, not subject to fatigue or distraction, not capable of deception or abandonment. He does not get tired of you. He does not have bad days. He is entirely oriented toward you, not in the way a human friend is oriented toward you, with divided attention, with their own needs and struggles and preoccupations, with an undivided, undiminished, permanent attention that has not wavered from the moment of your creation and will not waver until the moment your soul reaches its final destination. He knows you better than you know yourself. He has watched every moment of your life, the private ones, the ones you are proud of, the ones you would rather forget. He has seen you at your worst and at your best and at the vast, ordinary middle of a human life, and his care for you has not altered. You cannot shock him, cannot exhaust his patience, cannot make him give up on you. He is capable only of continued faithful presence and continued active help. The tradition identifies several specific ways in which the guardian angel works in a human life, and they are worth naming clearly because they are not vague or merely spiritual. They are concrete and practical and operating in your life right now, whether you are aware of them or not. He protects you. This is the most commonly understood function of the guardian angel, and it is real. It is a real and active shield against dangers you never know about, against accidents avoided, against evil that approaches and is turned away without your knowledge. The vast majority of the guardian angel's protective work is invisible precisely because it succeeds. You never see the danger that was deflected. He guides you, not with an audible voice in most cases, but more often as the quiet prompting that makes you hesitate before a decision, the unease that makes you take a different route, the unexpected thought that arrives at the exact moment you needed it. You have experienced this. You may have called it intuition, or a hunch, or simply a feeling. The tradition has a more precise name for it. He intercedes for you. Your guardian angel carries your prayers and your needs before God with an advocacy and a love that supplements your own often weak and distracted prayer. He corrects you. Like Francis's angel who turned away when she sinned, the guardian angel works in the conscience, reinforcing the movements of grace, making the interior voice of right and wrong just a little clearer, a little harder to ignore. He accompanies you in death. The tradition is consistent that the guardian angel accompanies the soul at the moment of death and, for those who die in God's friendship, presents the soul before the throne of God. The companion who has walked every road of your life will walk the final one with you. What is most striking about the saints who knew their guardian angel well is not the extraordinary nature of their experiences. It is the ordinariness of the relationship beneath those extraordinary moments. It is the dailiness of it. Saint Padre Pio sent his guardian angel to friends who needed help, the way you might send a trusted colleague to represent you in a meeting you could not attend. He spoke of his angel with a matter-of-fact affection that had nothing performative about it. It was simply the way things were. He had a companion. He used the companionship. Saint Josemaría Escrivá encouraged people to greet their angel in the morning, to ask for help before difficult conversations, to thank him at the end of the day, to invoke him when entering a room where they needed to speak well or act with courage. Not as superstition, as relationship, as the activation of a companionship that already exists. This is available to you today in your specific life, with its specific burdens and graces and battles. The relationship already exists. What most of us lack is not the angel, but the awareness, the habit of turning toward the companion who is already there. There is a prayer that Catholics have known since childhood, simple enough for a child to memorize and deep enough to carry a lifetime. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, ever this day be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. Amen. It is easy to outgrow this prayer in the wrong direction, to leave it behind with the other things of childhood, as though the angel himself were something you have moved past. The saints suggest the opposite movement, to grow into it more deeply, to say it with more understanding, more gratitude, more conscious turning toward the companion it addresses. Light and guard, rule and guide. For functions, for gifts, given every day, operating whether you acknowledge them or not. Asking to receive them consciously changes something, not in the angel, who is already giving them, but in you. He is there. He has always been there. Turn toward him. Acknowledge him. Ask for his help in the specific, particular battle of your specific, particular day. You have a companion. You have always had one. Begin to live as though you know it, and watch what that knowledge does to the way you face what is ahead. Chapter 4. The Archangels, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Your guardian angel is not your only angelic companion. The three archangels, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, are named in Scripture and venerated by the Church as beings of enormous power and specific mission, available to be invoked in your particular battles. This chapter introduces each one and tells you what they bring to yours. To understand what the archangels are capable of, begin where many of the most astonishing interventions of heaven begin, with an ordinary person in an impossible situation and a voice that told her to go. Saint Joan of Arc grew up in Domremy, a small village in northeastern France, during one of the longest and most devastating conflicts in European history. The 100 Years' War had ground on for nearly a century. France was fractured and occupied, and the legitimate heir to the French throne had never been crowned. There was no earthly reason to think that a teenage peasant girl would change any of this. And then the voices began. Joan described them with a consistency that held up under interrogation by some of the most learned churchmen of her age. She heard them first at 13, a light, a voice, and a presence that she came to identify as Saint Michael. He came with others, Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret. But it was Michael who spoke to her first, who commissioned her, who told her that God had chosen her for an impossible task, and that she would not face it without help. What followed is one of the most astonishing stories in the history of the Church and of Europe. Joan obtained an audience with the Dauphin, identified him in a crowded court despite never having seen him, received command of an army, led a military campaign that broke the siege of Orleans, and delivered Charles VII to Reims for his coronation, all within the space of a year, all beginning from nothing, all accomplished under the direction of voices she never doubted and never abandoned, even at the end, even in the fire. Michael had come to a frightened girl in a village in France, and the history of a nation had turned. The archangels are not simply larger versions of the guardian angels. They are a different order of being in the angelic hierarchy, beings of enormous power and specific cosmic missions who appear at the great turning points of salvation history, and who remain, the Church teaches, actively present and available to those who invoke them. His name is a question and a declaration at once. In Hebrew, Michael means, "who is like God." It is the battle cry he is said to have hurled at Lucifer at the moment of the primordial rebellion, when a third of the angels turned against their creator and Michael led the faithful against them. Who is like God? The answer, of course, is no one. And in that answer, the battle was decided. Michael is the warrior archangel, the prince of the heavenly host, the defender of the Church and of souls. He appears in Scripture at the moments of greatest cosmic stakes, in the book of Daniel as the great prince who stands guard over God's people, in the letter of Jude rebuking the devil over the body of Moses, in the book of Revelation leading the armies of heaven against the dragon. He is not a gentle figure. He is a figure of power, authority, and absolute fidelity to God. Pope Leo XIII, who in 1884 composed the famous prayer to Saint Michael that was said after every low mass for nearly a century, wrote it after what he described as a vision of demonic forces being given a period of terrible power over the world. His response was to put the Church under Michael's protection. The prayer he wrote has the character of someone who has seen the size of what is coming and has turned, without panic but with great urgency, toward the one figure who can meet it. For those in spiritual battle, and Chapter 1 established that this means all of us, in varying degrees, Michael is the archangel to call upon, not instead of your guardian angel, but alongside him. When the battle is fierce, when the darkness feels heavy, Michael is the ally who has faced this before at a scale beyond human imagining and has never been defeated. He came to a 17-year-old girl in a village. He will come to you. If Michael is the warrior, Gabriel is the herald, the archangel of announcement, of the word that changes everything, of the moment when God breaks through the ordinary surface of human life and says, something new is beginning. Gabriel appears in the Gospel of Luke at the two great annunciations that open the story of salvation. First to Saint Zechariah in the temple, and then, in perhaps the most consequential conversation in human history, to a young woman in Nazareth. Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Those words, spoken by Gabriel to Mary, are the hinge on which everything turns. The Annunciation is not a scene of divine dictation. It is a scene of invitation, of God asking, through his messenger, whether a human soul will say yes to something that will cost everything. And Mary, who was afraid, who did not understand, who asked her honest question and received an honest answer, said yes. And the Word became flesh. Gabriel's particular gift to those who invoke him is the gift of the word that needs to be spoken, the clarity to understand what God is saying in your particular situation, the courage to say yes when yes is frightening. Think of the moments in your own life when you have needed to say something important and the words would not come. When you have needed to understand what God was asking of you and the silence felt impenetrable. Gabriel is the archangel of those moments. Raphael appears in the Book of Tobit, one of the most quietly human books in the entire Bible, a story of a faithful family in exile, of a young man sent on a dangerous journey, of a woman tormented by a demon, and of a companion who joins the journey and changes everything. The companion calls himself Azariah, a fellow Israelite. He guides young Tobias safely across a dangerous road. He instructs him in how to drive out the demon tormenting Sarah. He carries the prayer of Tobias and his father Tobit before God. He heals the elder Tobit's blindness. And when the journey is complete and every broken thing has been made whole, he reveals himself. I am Raphael, he says, one of the 7 holy angels who present the prayers of the saints and enter into the presence of the glory of the Holy One. His name means God heals. Raphael is the archangel of healing, of restoration, of the mending of what has been broken. He is particularly associated with those who are ill, those who are suffering in body or mind, those whose marriages or families have been damaged, those who have lost their way on a journey and need a companion who knows the road. He does not announce himself at the start. He travels as an ordinary companion on a difficult road. Tobias does not know, until the end, that he has been accompanied by an archangel. He only knows that something changed, that the road was safer than he feared, that the things which seemed impossible were somehow accomplished. How many of your own journeys have had a companion you did not recognize? Michael the warrior, Gabriel the messenger, Raphael the healer. 3 distinct missions, 3 distinct characters, 3 distinct gifts available to those who invoke them. And yet all 3 point in the same direction, toward a God who is not distant, not indifferent, not watching from a safe remove while his creatures struggle. Saint Joan of Arc, standing at the stake in Rouen in 1431, surrounded by her enemies, abandoned by the king she had crowned, hearing the fire being lit beneath her, spoke the names of Jesus, Mary, and Michael. Those were her last words. The warrior who had first spoken to her in the Garden of Domremy was the last name on her lips at the end. She was not alone. She had never been alone. Neither are you. The same companions who turned the course of a nation are available to you today, in the specific battle you are carrying. Chapter 5. Who Angels Are in Catholic Teaching. You have spent 4 chapters meeting your companions. Before we move to how they help you, it is worth pausing to understand what they actually are, not to satisfy theological curiosity, but because knowing what your angel is made of changes how fully you trust him. You cannot fully rely on a companion you have never properly met. The man who thought most rigorously about what angels actually are was not a mystic or a visionary, but a large, quiet Dominican friar who was once dismissed as a fool and became the greatest theological mind the medieval church ever produced. St. Thomas Aquinas was not a man given to intellectual sentiment. He was a Dominican friar of immense intellectual discipline, a systematic thinker who subjected every question to rigorous examination and refused to accept an answer simply because it was comfortable or traditional. He wrote about the angels at extraordinary length, devoting entire sections of his great work, the Summa Theologiae, to questions about their nature, their intelligence, their will, their hierarchy, their mission to human beings. He was doing it because he believed the angels were real, that they mattered enormously to the story of creation and salvation, and that the Church deserved a rigorous account of what they actually were. There is a story told about Aquinas as a young student at the University of Naples. He was large, quiet, and slow to speak in class, so slow that his fellow students nicknamed him the Dumb Ox. One day his teacher, the great Saint Albert the Great, listened to Thomas work through a problem in theology and turned to the other students. "You call this man a dumb ox," Albert said. "I tell you that one day the bellowing of this ox will be heard throughout the world." The bellowing reached the angels too, and what Aquinas said about them remains the deepest account we have. The first thing Catholic teaching establishes about angels is that they are creatures. They were made. They did not exist before God created them. This matters because it means they are not gods, not rival divinities, not independent powers to be feared or appeased. They are servants of the one God, created like everything else for his glory and for the good of his creation. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 defined that God created both the spiritual and corporal creation, angels and the material world, and that the angels were created good. Your guardian angel has never been corrupted, never been turned, never had a day of ambivalence about his mission. He was created for fidelity, and he has been faithful from the first moment of his existence. Angels are pure spirits. They have no bodies, no physical form. This is not a limitation. It is an immense freedom. An angel is not subject to the constraints that govern physical existence, not bound by location in the way a body is bound, not subject to fatigue, illness, aging, distraction, or death. Your guardian angel does not sleep. He is not elsewhere when you need him. He cannot be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Aquinas taught that each angel grasps truth in a single intuition, not working toward understanding, but simply seeing, completely and immediately, what is true. They do not learn the way we learn. They were created knowing. What this means for you is not abstract. It means the being beside you understands your situation with a clarity you will never achieve from inside it. He sees the whole of your life, past, present, the movements of grace and trial within it, with an intelligence that is not clouded by emotion, not distorted by fear, not limited by the narrow window of the present moment. When you feel confused and cannot see a way forward, your angel is not confused. He sees. Your guardian angel chose, with full angelic understanding, to be faithful. He has not wavered. He will not waver. The love he has for you is a fixed, full, permanent orientation of his entire being toward your good. The Church recognizes 9 choirs of angels, organized in 3 groupings that the tradition calls hierarchies. The highest, seraphim, cherubim, and thrones, exists closest to God. The middle hierarchy, dominions, virtues, and powers, governs the order of creation and carries out the great movements of providence in history. The lowest hierarchy, principalities, archangels, and angels, is most directly concerned with human beings and human history. Your guardian angel almost certainly belongs to this order, the one whose entire orientation is toward the human beings entrusted to their care. You exist within a creation far more populated and more alive than the visible world suggests. The help available to you comes from within a community of extraordinary beings, ordered by love and intelligence, working always in the direction of your good. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux asked his monks a question that has never lost its power. How great is your dignity? How worthy of reverence, when you know that the spirit assigned to guard you is so noble. And then, equally, how great ought your conduct to be, knowing that such a one is always at your side? When you truly know who is beside you, you live differently, not out of performance or fear, but out of a growing awareness of the dignity of the life you are living, a life accompanied by heaven, watched over by love, held within a story far larger than the visible one. You are not accompanied by a vague spiritual force. You are accompanied by a specific being, intelligent, powerful, faithful, permanent, whose existence has been bound up with yours since before you drew your first breath. The battle you are in is real, but so is the help, and the help is not smaller than the battle. It never has been. St. Thomas Aquinas spent his life trying to think clearly about realities that exceed the capacity of any human mind. Near the end of his life, after a mystical experience during Mass, he stopped writing. When his secretary urged him to continue, he said simply, "All that I have written seems to me like straw compared to what I have seen." Whatever he saw at the end, the angels were part of that vision, part of the fullness that made everything else feel thin. They are part of the fullness available to you too, not at the end of a lifetime of theological study, but now, in your specific life, your specific battle, your specific need. They are with you. They have always been with you. In the chapters ahead, we will look at exactly how, and you will find that the help is far more specific, far more practical, and far closer than you may have allowed yourself to believe. Chapter 6. Angelic Protection. You have already been protected more times than you know. The near miss you walked away from without understanding how. The hesitation that saved you. The decision you did not make. Most of your guardian angel's protective work is invisible because it succeeds. The danger deflected leaves no trace. This chapter is about understanding that protection, receiving it consciously, and trusting it honestly in the moments it does not look the way you expect. The clearest account of what that protection looks like at its most dramatic comes from a young soldier who survived something he should not have survived, and only later understood why. It was the Second World War, and the fighting in Italy was close and ferocious. A young officer named Giovanni Savino had been assigned to a dangerous operation and had written to Saint Padre Pio beforehand, asking for his prayers. What happened next was documented in testimony gathered after the war and examined by the Church as part of the investigation into Padre Pio's cause for canonization. On the night of the operation, Savino's unit came under fire. In the chaos and the darkness, with shells landing close and men falling around him, Savino saw a figure standing beside him, a robed figure, calm in the middle of the fire, whose presence seemed to create a kind of stillness around him. The figure said nothing. It simply stood there, and Savino, in the middle of a battle, felt something that made no rational sense given the circumstances. He felt safe. He survived the operation. Others around him did not. When he returned and eventually made his way to San Giovanni Rotondo to thank Padre Pio in person, the old friar greeted him before he could speak. He already knew. He had been there, or rather, he had sent someone there. The friar smiled and told Savino that he had asked his guardian angel to stand with him that night. One guardian angel, sent by a saint's intercession, standing in the middle of a war. It is not a small story. Protection is the gift most commonly associated with the guardian angel, and it is real in ways both dramatic and invisible. But it is also the gift most commonly misunderstood in ways that cause people genuine pain. Because when something terrible happens, they conclude that the protection failed, that the angel was not there, that the promise was false. This chapter is an honest look at what angelic protection actually is, what it does and does not mean, and why the most important protection your angel provides is very rarely the kind that makes the news. The Church has prayed Psalm 91 for centuries in the night prayer of Compline, the last prayer before sleep, the commending of the night to God. He will give his angels charge over you, to guard you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands, lest you strike your foot against a stone. That image, an angel bearing you up, hands under you, preventing even the smallest stumble, is not an exaggeration for poetic effect. It is a description of something that is happening continuously in ways you will almost never see. The protection of the guardian angel operates most of the time in the background of your life, turning away dangers before they reach you, deflecting what would harm you, creating small and unremarkable moments of safety that you notice only as the absence of disaster. Your angel has been working in that register your entire life. Most of it you will never know. The protection that succeeds leaves no trace, only the ordinary morning, the unremarkable day, the life continuing. There are, throughout the history of the Church and in the documented accounts of the saints, moments when angelic protection becomes visible, when the veil thins and what is normally operating in the background becomes unmistakable. Saint Scholastica, the twin sister of Saint Benedict, was traveling to visit her brother when a violent storm broke out. Scholastica prayed, and the storm did not stop, but something changed in those traveling with her. A calm settled over them that had nothing to do with the weather, and they arrived safely. The accounts describe her companions speaking afterward of a sense of being held, of the danger being somehow contained, as though something was moving alongside them in the dark. These visible moments tend to occur at moments of genuine extremity, when the ordinary resources of human courage and capability have reached their limit. The recognition comes afterward, in the stillness, when the person who was protected has time to think about what just happened. The soldier Savino did not know, in the middle of the battle, that Padre Pio had sent his angel. He knew only that something was with him, and that he was not as afraid as he should have been, and that he did not die. The understanding came later. This is often how it works. The protection is given in the moment. The knowledge of who gave it arrives in the quiet afterward, if the soul is paying attention. One of the most striking aspects of guardian angel protection is that it does not depend on your asking. Your angel is protecting you continuously, whether or not you are thinking about him, whether or not your prayer life is in good order. God sends an angel to Hagar when she has fled in despair and is not praying. She is simply sitting in the wilderness, waiting to die. The angel finds her there, not because she sought him, but because God sent him. There is something enormously freeing about this. You do not need to have your spiritual life perfectly ordered to be protected. He is there regardless, in the seasons of dryness and distance, in the periods when your faith feels thin and your prayer is absent. He has always been there in those moments. He has never left. If the guardian angel protects, why do terrible things happen? Why do faithful Catholics, people of genuine prayer and deep love for God, suffer catastrophic losses? These questions deserve an honest answer, not a pious one that papers over the wound. The honest answer begins with what the Church has always taught. Angelic protection does not mean the absence of all suffering. It never has. The saints who were most visibly accompanied by their angels, Padre Pio, John Vianney, Gemma Galgani, Joan of Arc, suffered enormously. They were not exempted from pain. They were accompanied through it. The protection of the guardian angel operates within the mystery of divine providence, which permits suffering it does not cause, and which draws goods from evils that no human intelligence can anticipate. What the angel does in those moments is what he has always done in the darkest accounts of the saints. He stays. He accompanies. He strengthens. He does not remove the cup, but he is present with you while you drink it. The protection is real. It is also, sometimes, the protection of being held in the suffering rather than removed from it. That is not a lesser gift. In the experience of the saints, it is often the greater one. There is a practice among the saints so consistent across the tradition that dismissing it would be a mistake. It is the practice of consciously invoking angelic protection before entering into anything difficult. Saint Josemaría Escrivá did it before difficult conversations. Padre Pio did it before every Mass, before hearing confessions, before sleep. St. John Henry Newman wrote about the habit of turning toward the guardian angel at the beginning of each day as a simple act of receiving what was already being offered, not manufacturing the protection, but acknowledging it, opening the hands. The act of invocation does not create the protection. Your angel is already there. What invocation does is orient you. It turns your awareness toward the companionship, and in doing so changes the quality of what you carry into the difficult thing. You go into the hard conversation knowing you are not alone. You face the long night of grief or anxiety with an awareness, however thin, that the darkness is inhabited by love. Giovanni Savino survived a battle he should not have survived, and came home and stood in front of a small friar who already knew his name. He had been protected, he had been accompanied, and in the knowing of it, something settled in him that the war had not been able to take. That settling is available to you. Your angel is with you. He has been with you all along. You only need to turn toward the presence that has never turned away from you. Chapter 7. Angelic Strength and Weakness. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that no amount of ordinary rest fixes. It is the exhaustion of a long battle, weeks or months or years of fighting the same fight, carrying the same weight, getting up after the same falls. If you are there right now, this chapter is not going to tell you to try harder. It is going to tell you where the strength actually comes from, and why the depth of your depletion is not a disqualification, but the very condition in which the gift arrives most clearly. The man who proved this most unforgettably did so on the cold stone floor of his own cell, with nothing left at all. St. Paul of the Cross was the 18th century founder of the Passionists, a man of extraordinary missionary energy who preached across Italy for decades. In his later years, the mystical consolations that had accompanied his earlier life fell away almost entirely, leaving him in a spiritual aridity that lasted, by his own account, for 45 years. But this particular night was different. This was collapse, physical, emotional, spiritual, all at once. He had nothing left. He could not pray. He could not rise. He lay on the stone floor of his room and could not find, anywhere inside himself, the smallest reserve of strength to continue. What happened next he described with a simplicity that makes the account more believable, not less. A warmth came over him, a sense of presence, close and steady, and with it, a strength that was not his own, not a restoration of his own depleted resources, but something entirely different, something that came from outside and filled the empty place where his own strength had been. He got up. He went back to his work. He lived another 20 years. He simply said that he had been given strength he did not have, in a moment when his own had entirely run out, and that he believed the gift came through the ministry of his angel. One of the consistent patterns in the accounts of angelic strengthening across the tradition is that the strength given is qualitatively different from ordinary human resilience. It is something that arrives from outside the person entirely, a strength that the recipient did not generate and could not have generated. The Gospel accounts of Jesus in Gethsemane use the same language. An angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. The Greek word used suggests a fortifying, a making firm, not a comfort that soothes, but a strength that stabilizes, that makes it possible to stand when standing was not possible a moment before. The tradition has a name for this. It is called the Ministry of Consolation and Fortification, and it is one of the specific gifts the Church has always attributed to the angelic companions. They do not only protect from external danger. They strengthen from within, working in the soul, in the will, in whatever interior capacity makes it possible to continue, in the moments when continuation seems entirely beyond reach. St. Paul the Apostle wrote to the Corinthians with a directness about his own weakness that still has the power to stop a reader. When I am weak, then I am strong. He had been given what he called a thorn in the flesh, some unnamed suffering that he begged God 3 times to remove, and 3 times God declined. The answer he received instead was, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." The saints who have written most honestly about angelic strengthening have consistently confirmed this pattern. The strength comes not despite the weakness, but through it. The emptying is the preparation for the filling, which means the very thing that makes you feel most disqualified from help, the depth of the depletion, the completeness of the exhaustion, is precisely what positions you to receive it. You cannot be too far gone for the angel to reach. The angel who stands beside you has watched every moment of the battle that brought you to this point, and he is not surprised by where you are. He has been with you through everything that led here, and he is with you here. It would be dishonest to suggest that angelic strength always arrives in a felt rush of warmth and restored energy. Sometimes it does, but more often, in the ordinary experience of those who have written about it, the strengthening is quieter and harder to identify in the moment. It is the simple fact that you got up when you were sure you could not, That you said the prayer you were certain you had no capacity to say. That you made the phone call, kept the appointment, returned to the work, had the difficult conversation, not because you felt strong enough, but because something gave you the next step when you could not see where it came from. Saint Teresa of Lisieux wrote about going to sleep during prayer and waking to find that the prayer had somehow continued, that grace had been working while she was unconscious of it. She wrote about feeling nothing and choosing to act as though she felt everything, and finding that the acting itself was somehow sustained from beyond her. This is the texture of angelic strengthening in an ordinary life. Not always dramatic, not always felt, but consistently, quietly, insistently there. The next step given when you needed it, the strength for the moment arriving in the moment, not before. There is a particular challenge for people of faith in the seasons of spiritual dryness. The long stretches when prayer feels empty, when the presence of God feels entirely absent, and the idea of angelic companionship feels like a story you tell yourself to get through the day. Saint John of the Cross, who mapped the territory of spiritual darkness more precisely than anyone before or since, wrote that the dark night of the soul is not God's withdrawal but God's deeper approach, a purification that strips away the felt consolations so that the soul can receive something more solid and less dependent on feeling. The angel accompanies this process. He does not manufacture false consolations to make the darkness easier. He remains steadily, faithfully present, working in ways the soul cannot feel, sustaining what the soul cannot sustain on its own. If you are in that season now, when the faith feels thin and the help feels theoretical, this is the time to make the simplest possible act of trust. To acknowledge, even without feeling it, that you are not alone, that the strength you need will arrive in the moment you need it, that the angel beside you has not moved. Paul of the Cross got up from the floor and lived another 20 years. He did not get up because he had recovered his own strength. He got up because he was given enough for the next hour, the next day, the next decade of work. The manna in the desert could not be stored. It came daily. It was given for the day, exactly as much as was needed, and no more. The provision was designed to require daily return, daily reception, daily dependence on the giver. Angelic strength works in that register. It is not stockpiled. It is given in the moment of need, sufficient for that moment, requiring you to return tomorrow and receive again. Come back. The strength is there. It has always been there. You have not been left to run on empty alone, and the one standing beside you has never once considered leaving. Chapter 8. Angelic Help Over Fear. Fear is probably woven through whatever battle brought you to this book. Not necessarily the acute fear of an immediate danger, but the chronic, ambient fear that settles into a life. The fear of what is coming, of not being enough, of the situation not changing, of the thing you cannot control. This chapter is about how your angel enters into that fear, not to dismiss it, but to meet it before the deliverance comes. The most striking account of what that looks like is found not in a mystical vision, but in the middle of an ordinary night in a prison in Jerusalem, where a man was sleeping so deeply that an angel had to strike him to wake him up. The Apostle Peter had been arrested by Herod Agrippa, thrown into prison, and was scheduled for execution the next morning. St. James, the brother of John, had already been killed. The early church was under genuine threat, and Peter, on the night before what everyone expected to be his death, was asleep. Not the shallow, restless sleep of a man trying to escape his fear. The guards had to strike him to wake him. It was the deep sleep of someone who had, by some grace that exceeded his own nature, arrived at a place beyond the reach of the terror that should have been consuming him. The angel came in a light, struck him on the side, and said simply, "Rise up quickly." And Peter rose. The chains fell from his hands. The angel led him past the first guard, the second guard, through the iron gate that opened of its own accord, and out into the street. Then the angel departed. Peter stood in the street in the dark, and the account says that he came to himself, as though he had been in some other state, some calm beyond ordinary waking, and was now returning to ordinary consciousness. He had walked out of prison. He had walked past soldiers. He had passed through a locked gate. And for most of that journey, the account suggests he was not afraid. Something had met his fear before the angel came and dealt with the chains. The sleep itself was the first miracle. Fear is perhaps the most universal of the battles this book has been describing. Every other struggle, illness, loss, spiritual dryness, the weight of prolonged difficulty, has fear woven through it. It operates in the background of most human lives with a persistence that is remarkable, surfacing at night, settling into decisions, narrowing the horizon of what seems possible. Catholic teaching is honest about what lies beneath much of this fear. It is not simply a psychological condition, though it has psychological dimensions. It is partly spiritual, a consequence of the fallen condition, an inheritance of the primal rupture between humanity and God. Fear entered with the fall. It is part of the landscape of the battle. And the angels, who are sent into the battle, are sent into the fear as well. The most repeated command in all of Scripture, more repeated than any commandment, any instruction, any moral directive, is this: do not be afraid. In various forms, in both testaments, across dozens of books and centuries of revelation, the same word arrives. Do not fear. Fear not. Do not be afraid. A significant portion of those commands are delivered by angels. Gabriel to Mary, do not be afraid, for you have found favor with God. The angel to the shepherds on the night of the Nativity, do not be afraid, for I bring you tidings of great joy. The angel to the women at the empty tomb, do not be afraid. To Zechariah in the temple, to Joseph in his dreams, to Daniel trembling at the vision, do not be afraid. The pattern is not accidental. Angels appear at the most fear-inducing moments in the biblical story, and their first task, almost always, is to address the fear. Before the message, before the instruction, before anything else, do not be afraid. This is not a command to feel differently than you feel. It is not a dismissal of the fear or a denial of the danger. The danger facing Mary was real. The shepherds were genuinely terrified. The angel does not tell them their fear is irrational. He tells them something more important. In what is coming, fear does not need to have the last word. Fear narrows. It contracts the interior horizon, makes the future look smaller and more threatening than it is, reduces the visible options from many to few to one. A person living under chronic fear does not make the same decisions as a person living in freedom. They retreat, they defer, they begin to manage rather than live. St. Augustine, who knew fear from the inside, who had spent years running from the God he half believed in, terrified of what full surrender might cost, wrote about this contraction with the authority of someone who had experienced the release from it. The heart, he said, is restless until it rests in God. The restlessness he described is at least partly the restlessness of a soul operating under fear, never quite settled, never quite at home, always braced for the next difficulty. What the angel brings into this contracted interior is, the tradition suggests, something like light into a dark room. Not the removal of the difficulty, but the restoration of perspective, the capacity to see the situation as it actually is rather than as fear has made it appear. The fear does not necessarily disappear immediately, but its power over the will is loosened. The horizon opens. The next step becomes visible. St. Thomas More was a man of extraordinary intelligence, deep faith, and genuine human warmth who spent the last months of his life in the Tower of London, facing an execution he could have avoided at any point by signing a document he believed to be false. He was afraid. He said so plainly, without performance or false bravado. He was afraid of the pain of execution. He prayed specifically and repeatedly that God would not let him be a coward at the end. He asked for the courage to be faithful when the moment came. The courage arrived. On the scaffold on Tower Hill in July 1535, More was calm, clear, and even gently humorous. He died without the cowardice he had feared, with a steadiness that the witnesses remembered for the rest of their lives. The courage was not manufactured. It was received, a little at a time, in exactly the amounts needed for each day. St. Faustina Kowalska wrote extensively about her own struggles with fear. Her angel appeared to her in moments of particular distress and spoke to her, not with grand reassurances, but with the simple, solid reminder that she was not alone and that what was asked of her was not being asked without the provision to accomplish it. "Do not fear," the angel told her. "I am always with you." Always. That word again. The word that keeps appearing in the accounts of those who have known their angel companions most closely. Not sometimes. Not in emergencies. Always. One of the most useful things that can be said about chronic fear is that it almost never lives in the present moment. Fear lives in the future, in the projected disaster, the anticipated loss, the imagined worst case. It takes something that has not happened and makes it feel as though it has already happened, and then makes you live in the aftermath of that imaginary catastrophe. The angels, when they come to address fear in Scripture, consistently bring the person back to the present. Rise up. Come. Follow me. The instruction is always immediate, always concrete, always oriented to the next step rather than the whole terrifying road. Gabriel does not walk Mary through the entire unfolding of her son's life, death, and resurrection on the day of the Annunciation. He tells her what she needs to know for today. Your angel, who sees your situation with perfect clarity and without the distorting lens of fear, knows the next step. He is not withholding the whole map to torment you. He is giving you what you need for today because today is what you have, and because the God who provides for today will provide for tomorrow when tomorrow arrives. St. Paul, writing from his own imprisonment, wrote to the Philippians, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds." The peace that passes understanding, not the peace that makes sense given the circumstances, not the peace that arrives when the situation has been resolved, the peace that comes before the resolution, in the middle of the uncertainty, in a way that cannot be explained by the external facts. Peter slept that peace. Thomas More found it on the scaffold. Faustina received it in her cell when the angel came. You cannot produce this peace. You can only receive it. And receiving it begins with the same simple act that has appeared throughout this book, turning toward the companion who is already there, acknowledging his presence, and making the smallest possible act of trust that the fear, however real, however loud, however long it has been running your life, does not need to have the final word. The angel met Peter before the chains were broken. He meets you in the fear before the deliverance comes. Do not be afraid. He is with you. He has been with you in every fear you have ever faced, and He is with you in this one. Chapter 9. How to Walk with Your Angel Companions. Everything this book has covered, who your companions are, what they do, how they protect and strengthen and meet your fear, has been building toward this chapter, because the knowledge is only as useful as the practice it produces. This chapter is about the how, the simple, daily, sustainable habits that turn belief in the angels into actual lived companionship. No one modeled this more practically or more consistently than a Spanish priest who built a worldwide organization on the foundation of ordinary holiness, and who began every single morning the same way. Saint Josemaría Escrivá was a Spanish priest who founded Opus Dei in 1928 and spent the rest of his life building a worldwide organization dedicated to the sanctification of ordinary work and everyday life. He was canonized in 2002. He was also, by every account from those who knew him closely, a man of extraordinary practical piety, someone who had found ways to live in continuous awareness of the spiritual realities surrounding him without becoming unworldly or eccentric or unable to function in the ordinary demands of a busy life. The morning greeting to his guardian angel was not a formal prayer. It was exactly what it sounds like, a greeting, the kind you would give to someone you knew well and were glad to see. Good morning. I am glad you are here. Let us begin the day together. He spoke about it in almost those terms, a simple, conscious, daily acknowledgement of the companion who was already present, a turning of attention toward what was already real. He also sent his guardian angel ahead of him. Before a difficult meeting, before a conversation he was anxious about, before entering a room where he needed to speak well or listen carefully, he would ask his angel to go before him, to prepare the way, to work in whatever manner was best in the situation, to act on his behalf in the ways a human being cannot act. And he asked his angel to carry his prayers. On the days when his own prayer felt thin or distracted, he trusted that his angel was presenting what he had to offer, imperfect, incomplete, genuinely meant, before God on his behalf. 3 simple practices: greeting, sending ahead, and trusting prayer. A lifetime of walking with his companion, lived in the middle of an extraordinarily active and demanding life, built on habits so ordinary that they required no special conditions to maintain. The saints whose stories have carried us through these chapters did not arrive at their intimacy with the angels through spectacular mystical experiences or lengthy theological study. They arrived there through practice, through the gradual, often unglamorous work of developing habits of attention, habits of invocation, habits of gratitude that, over time, deepened an awareness that was always available to them and is always available to you. Begin where Escrivá began, with the morning. Before the phone, before the news, before the first thought about the day's demands, turn toward your angel. You do not need words for this, though words are fine. What is needed is simply the act of attention, the deliberate turning of your awareness toward the presence that has been with you through the night and is with you still. A simple acknowledgement. You are here. I know it. Good morning. This practice does something subtle but important over time. It establishes the orientation of the day before the day's noise begins. It places the companion first, before the demands, before the fear, before the accumulated weight of whatever is pressing. It is an act of reception before an act of doing. The form matters less than the consistency. A brief, imperfect greeting given every morning is worth infinitely more than an elaborate prayer given occasionally. Escrivá's practice of sending his angel ahead is one of the most practically useful gifts the tradition offers for the battles of daily life. The practice rests on a simple reality. Your angel can act in ways you cannot. He is not bound by your physical presence. He can go where you cannot go, work in ways that are beyond your capacity, prepare ground that you will not reach for hours or days. Before a difficult conversation, one where you fear conflict, or where important things need to be said and heard, ask your angel to go ahead of you and to work in whatever way is best. You do not need to specify what that means. Your angel understands the situation with a clarity you do not have. The act of sending him is itself an act of trust, a surrender of your need to control the outcome and a handing of it to someone with better sight. Before a medical appointment that frightens you, before a job interview, before a family gathering where the tensions run deep and the history is complicated, before any threshold you are afraid to cross, send your angel ahead. Ask him to work, then walk through the door. Walking with your angel companion is a throughout-the-day practice, a habit of turning in the small moments as readily as in the large ones. The saints who walked most closely with their angels describe a kind of continuous interior conversation, not a formal prayer, not an interruption of their ordinary work and attention, but a running awareness of the companion beside them that surfaced naturally in moments of need. When the anger rose unexpectedly, a quick interior turn. Help me here. When the anxiety began its familiar spiral, a brief acknowledgement. I cannot do this alone, and I do not need to. When a decision presented itself and the right path was unclear, a simple asking. Show me what I cannot see. Saint Teresa of Lisieux described her approach to the angels with the same directness she brought to everything. She asked them for what she needed, simply and without elaborate ceremony, in the manner of a child asking a trusted older brother for help with something too heavy to lift alone. Your need is sufficient. Ask. Just as the morning greeting opens the day in conscious companionship, the evening is the natural moment for return, for acknowledging what the day held and what the companion carried through it with you. This is primarily an act of gratitude, a looking back at the day with the specific intention of noticing where you were accompanied, where the help arrived, where something held you that was not your own strength or your own wisdom. Over time, this habit of noticing builds something, a growing body of evidence, personal and specific and entirely your own, that the accompaniment is real. You begin to recognize the pattern. You begin to see, in retrospect, moments you walked through at the time without understanding what was holding you. The evidence accumulates quietly, and as it accumulates, the trust deepens. Frances of Rome saw her angel for 23 years. The seeing was the culmination of a lifetime of this kind of daily faithfulness, morning greeting, daily asking, evening gratitude. The visibility was the flower. The roots were ordinary. Most Catholics pray, most of the time, with divided attention, distraction, dryness, and a nagging sense that what they are offering is inadequate. The tradition offers a simple response. Ask your angel to pray with you, and to carry what you cannot. Your guardian angel is in continuous adoration of God. This is the nature of his existence, the permanent orientation of his being. When you turn to prayer, even badly, even with half your attention elsewhere, you are joining something he is already doing. You are not beginning a prayer from scratch and hoping it reaches God through the noise. You are adding your weak voice to a song that is already being sung, beside you, unceasingly, by a being whose prayer is pure and unbroken. Ask him to supplement what you cannot supply. Ask him to carry what your distraction drops. Ask him to present to God not only what you managed to say, but what you meant to say. He knows what you mean. He has been listening to your whole life. He knows the prayer beneath the prayer. Walking with your angel companions is not a special spiritual state reserved for those who have achieved a certain level of holiness or prayer. It is simply the daily practice of receiving what has always been given, turning toward the companion who has always been there, acknowledging his presence, asking for his help, thanking him for what he carries, and then going on with the day. Escrivá greeted his angel and then ran Opus Dei. Padre Pio sent his angel ahead and then spent 12 hours in the confessional. Thomas More walked with his companion through the Tower of London and then climbed the scaffold with a quiet joke. Frances of Rome saw her angel and then fed the poor of Rome and ran a household and raised children and buried some of them. The accompaniment does not remove you from your life. It equips you to live it more fully, more courageously, more freely than fear and exhaustion and the grinding weight of prolonged battle would otherwise allow. You have a companion. You have always had one. Turn toward him. Greet him. Ask for his help. Thank him at the end of the day. Walk together. This is not a spiritual practice reserved for the advanced. It is the simplest possible response to the greatest gift you have been given. Chapter 10. Daily Victory in the Battles of Life. Before this chapter can give you victory, it has to take something away from you, a definition of victory that does not exist and has been causing you harm. The victory the saints describe, the victory that is genuinely available to you in the battles of your life, looks almost nothing like the resolution and relief you have probably been waiting for. But it is more solid, more real, and far more within your reach than that version ever was. To see what it actually looks like, we begin not with a warrior or a mystic, but with a monk, a flask of wine, and a small act of dishonesty that was met with something entirely unexpected. The monk Exhilaratus had been sent to Saint Benedict with a gift of wine, 2 small flasks, a gesture of goodwill from a local nobleman. But Exhilaratus had kept 1 flask for himself, intending to sell it on his return journey. He had no particular reason to think Benedict would know. When Exhilaratus arrived and presented the single flask, Benedict thanked him warmly and then said, quietly and without accusation, "Take care of the other flask you are carrying. Do not drink from it. Tilt it carefully and you will see what it contains." Exhilaratus tilted the flask. A serpent came out. The account, recorded in the dialogues of Pope St. Gregory the Great, is one of dozens of stories from Benedict's life in which the ordinary and the miraculous meet without drama or flourish. What interests Gregory is not the wonder of the serpent, but the quality of the life that produced such clarity, a life so ordered by God, so accompanied by the powers of heaven, that the hidden things became visible and the dangers were deflected as a matter of course. Benedict went on to found the monastery of Monte Cassino, write the rule that would organize Western monasticism for 15 centuries, and shape the spiritual and cultural life of Europe in ways that are still operating today. He did none of this through spectacular single victories. He did it through an unbroken succession of ordinary days, lived faithfully, in the company of God and his angels, one after another, for decades. That is what daily victory looks like. Not a triumph. A succession of ordinary days, kept. We need to talk honestly about the word victory, because it is one of the most misunderstood words in the Christian vocabulary, and the misunderstanding causes real harm to people who are trying to live faithful lives and measuring themselves against a definition of victory that does not exist. Victory, in the popular imagination, tends to mean resolution. The illness healed, the marriage restored, The prodigal child returned, the fear overcome, permanently, so that it does not return. The battle ended. But this is almost never what the saints describe. The illness may not be healed. The child may not return. The fear may come back tomorrow morning. And yet something the tradition would unhesitatingly call victory has been happening throughout, is happening now, in the middle of the unresolved difficulty, in the daily choice to continue, to trust, to reach for the companion beside you, and keep going. Daily victory is not the end of the battle. It is the faithful living of each day within it. Saint Benedict Joseph Labre was a French pilgrim who spent the last years of his life living rough on the streets of Rome, visiting the churches, subsisting on alms and leftovers. He was, by any external measure, a man who had failed at everything the world counts as success. He was also a man of extraordinary interior life, of deep, sustained, luminous prayer, whom the beggars of Rome recognized as something different from themselves and came to for blessing, and whom the city mourned openly when he died in 1783. He was canonized in 1881. What was the victory of Benedict Joseph Labre's life? The victory was the daily fidelity, the getting up each morning, the making his way to the churches, the receiving of whatever God sent with a freedom from complaint that the people around him found almost incomprehensible. His angel walked with him through the streets of Rome, through the cold, through the hunger, through every day of a life that looked, from the outside, like defeat, and was, from the inside, one long, unbroken act of love. That is victory. It does not always look like what we expect. Most of the battles in a human life are not fought on dramatic terrain. They are fought in the kitchen, the bedroom, the commute, the workplace, the family gathering, the 3 in the morning wakefulness. They are fought in the small decisions that nobody sees and that do not seem significant in the moment, but that, accumulated over a lifetime, constitute the whole character of a person's relationship with God. The choice to speak kindly when irritation is the easier response. The choice to pray when tiredness argues against it. The choice to trust when anxiety is louder. The choice to return after a failure rather than remaining in the shame of it. These are the daily battles. They are the terrain on which daily victory is either won or lost. Your angel companion is as present to these small battles as he is to the large ones. He is not only activated in crises. He is available in every small decision, every ordinary moment, every unremarkable Tuesday that is in fact the substance of your entire life. Saint Teresa of Lisieux understood this completely. Her little way was precisely a theology of the small battle, the conviction that the tiny acts of love and fidelity, offered with great intention in the hidden moments of an ordinary day, were as pleasing to God as the grand gestures of the martyrs. She did not have grand gestures to offer. She had the refectory and the laundry and the sisters who irritated her and the tuberculosis that was quietly killing her. She offered it all, and she did not offer it alone. No account of daily victory is honest if it does not address the false, because the battles of life include not only the external difficulties but the internal ones, the sins, the failures, the moments of weakness where you chose badly and know it, the patterns that return despite your best intentions. The enemy's most effective weapon is not the initial fall. It is what comes after, the shame, the discouragement, the whispered argument that this fall proves you are beyond help. St. Francis Delaware Sales addressed this paralysis with a directness that still cuts through centuries of distance. When you fall, he wrote, do not waste time examining the fall at length. Pick yourself up, kiss the hand of God, and continue. Your angel is there in the return. He is not moved because you fell. He has not withdrawn in disappointment or reassessed his commitment to you. He is there, steady, faithful, exactly where he was before, ready to accompany the next step of the return as he accompanied every step that preceded the fall. The daily victory is won not by the people who do not fall. It is won by the people who keep getting up, who fall 70 times 7 and return 70 times 7 and find, each time, that the companion beside them has not gone anywhere. There is a perspective available to your guardian angel that is not available to you. Your angel sees your whole life, not just the chapter you are currently in, with its particular difficulties and its unclear resolution, but the whole arc, where you have come from, what you have already survived, where the current trial fits within the larger movement of God's work in your soul. He accompanies you through a chapter whose ending he can see, even when you cannot. Saint Monica prayed for her son Augustine for 17 years before his conversion. 17 years of sustained, faithful, sometimes anguished prayer, with no visible result, with her son moving further into a life she found painful to watch. Her angel walked with her through every year of that long, invisible, daily victory. Every prayer that seemed to produce nothing, every ordinary morning on which she rose and chose faithfulness again. Augustine was converted. He became the greatest theologian the Western Church has produced. Monica's daily victories, invisible to everyone including herself for most of those 17 years, were real. They were accumulating. They were building towards something she could not see from inside the battle, but which the angel beside her could see from the beginning. This is, in the end, what this chapter and this book have been building toward. Not a formula for a difficulty-free life. Not a guarantee that the specific battle you are carrying will resolve in the way you hope. But the knowledge that you are accompanied, that the accompaniment is real and powerful and entirely faithful, and that the daily choice to keep going, to greet your angel in the morning and ask for help in the moment, and return after the fall, and trust that the companion beside you sees the whole road, is itself the victory. Benedict of Nursia shaped Western civilization one ordinary day at a time. Monica prayed one faithless feeling morning at a time. Benedict Joseph Labre walked the streets of Rome one cold, hungry day at a time. Teresa of Lisieux offered the small acts of her small life one unglamorous moment at a time. And each of them, in the particular poverty of their daily faithfulness, became someone through whom God changed the world. You do not know what your daily faithfulness is building. You do not know what your angel sees from where he stands. You do not know the full shape of the story you are inside, but you are not required to know it. You are required only to take the next step, to get up after the fall, to greet the morning with your companion and ask for the strength the day will need, to trust that the one walking beside you has never lost a battle he was commissioned to fight. Walk forward, one day, one step, one morning greeting, and one evening return. Daily victory is not a destination. It is what the walk looks like from the inside. And you are not walking alone. You have never been. Go forward. Conclusion. You are never without help. Something has shifted if these pages have done what they were written to do. Not the circumstances, perhaps. The battle may be exactly where it was when you opened the first chapter. The illness, the grief, the fear, the long unresolved difficulty, none of that has changed because you read a book. But something else has, or can have, if you choose to receive it. You know now who is walking beside you. You are in a battle. That is not a metaphor or a spiritual exaggeration. The battles of life are real. The suffering is real. The spiritual resistance is real. The enemy who exploits your particular weaknesses is real and patient and has been at this longer than you have. You were right to take the battle seriously. The mistake was only in thinking you were meant to face it alone. You were never meant to face it alone. From the first moment of your existence, God made a specific provision against your aloneness. He stationed beside you a being of intelligence and power and permanent faithful love, a guardian whose care for you is as particular as your name, as constant as your breathing, as real as the ground beneath your feet as you hear these words. Your guardian angel has been with you through every battle you have already survived, through the moments that should have broken you and did not, through the seasons of dryness when prayer felt empty and God felt absent, through the falls and the returns, the failures and the recoveries, the long ordinary stretches where nothing dramatic was happening and the life was simply being lived, one day at a time, in the quiet, faithful company of the one assigned to walk it with you. The Archangels, Michael the warrior, Gabriel the herald, Raphael the healer, stand ready to be invoked at the pivots of your particular battle. They have met every form of darkness that exists. They have never been defeated. They are available to you, not as distant cosmic powers, but as companions who have been commissioned by the God who made you and loves you to fight on your side. The practices are simple. Greet your angel in the morning. Send him ahead of you into the difficult things. Ask for help in the moment, without ceremony, as a child asks an older brother, because your need is entirely sufficient to attract the help. Thank him at the end of the day. Ask him to carry your prayer when your own capacity for prayer has run thin. None of this requires a particular level of spiritual advancement. None of it requires you to feel anything. It requires only the small, daily, repeated act of turning toward the companion who is already there, of receiving, consciously and with gratitude, what has always been given. The saints who have carried us through these pages, Padre Pio and Gemma Galgani and John Vianney, Francis of Rome and Joan of Arc, Thomas More and Teresa of Lisieux and Monica and Benedict, and all the rest, were not a different kind of human being from you. They were people who learned, through the particular suffering of their particular lives, to receive what God had always been offering. They became extraordinary through the faithful living of ordinary days, accompanied by companions they came to know as intimately as any human friendship, more reliably than most. That is available to you. It has always been available to you. The battle continues. It will continue until the day you walk your final road, accompanied by the companion who has never left your side, and are presented before the God who commissioned that companionship before you were born. On that day you will understand, fully and at last, everything that was happening in the battles you could not see clearly from inside them. You will see the protections that were given without your knowing, the strength that arrived in the moments your own had failed, the fears that were met before they could consume you, the falls that were caught, the prayers that were carried. On that day the angel will have finished his task, and if you have walked faithfully, not perfectly, not without falls, but faithfully, returning always, trusting always, reaching always for the companion beside you, he will beckon you to follow him, as he beckoned St. Francis of Rome, as he will beckon you. Until then, keep walking. The companion is with you. The help is real. The victory, daily, imperfect, accompanied, sufficient, is yours for the receiving. You are never without help. You have never been without help, not for a single moment of your life. Walk forward with that knowledge. It is enough. A prayer to your angel companions. Heavenly Father, you did not make me for aloneness. From the first moment of my existence, You placed beside me a companion, a guardian faithful beyond my understanding, present beyond my awareness, powerful beyond what the battles of my life have required. I confess that I have not always known this. Forgive me for the times I forgot, and teach me, from this day forward, to walk as one who is accompanied. To my guardian angel, I know you now, not as a doctrine or a memory from childhood, but as the companion you have always been, steady in my weakness, present in my fear, faithful through every battle. I did not know you were fighting beside me. Walk with me still. Go before me into the things that frighten me. Strengthen me when my own strength fails. Carry my prayer when I have no words left. Correct me when I wander. Guard me through the night. And when the last battle is over, and the last road has been walked, let me home. Saint Michael, defend me in battle. Saint Gabriel, speak the word I need to hear. Saint Raphael, heal what is broken in me. Lord Jesus, who made the angels and made me, who placed light beside darkness, and companionship beside every battle, I offer what I have, this imperfect life, this willing heart, this daily return to the companion you gave me. I am not alone. I have never been alone. I will not be alone. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.